Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, welcome everyone. I'm excited to learn with you. It's been a while, so glad to be back. And yeah, just kind of, I know everyone has their different styles. I will say, as we go through and doing our learning together, I encourage you to write in the chat, and I will do my best to monitor the chat, and I will, take questions and stuff from the chat. If I miss something, I apologize. There's a lot to see, but please feel free. I don't want this to just be me talking, and I know there are a lot of us, so it can be harder to, have people come off and share, but we will have opportunity for that. And then especially in the chat, that's a good way to share your thoughts as they come up. Awesome. Okay, so that's what's happening. Okay, so now and we have Mara, if you want to share the links to the so I'll share my screen in a moment, but I have a slideshow presentation. So there's a link to that, and then there's a link to just the source sheet if you want to see the text in a way that if you want to like print it out or something. I don't know. I have mine, so those are two options for you. If you want to go back to it later on Shabbos, you can. So great. We will be studying the Parsha this week, Parashat Miketz, which is such a fun one. I think all of these Joseph Torah portions are really fun, and this one's very dramatic. And yeah, so just to kind of give us background to where we're going to land. So the first part of the Torah portion, we have Pharaoh having these troubling dreams that no one can interpret, and finally, the one of Pharaoh's servants remembers, oh my gosh, Joseph interpreted my dream correctly. I'm going to have him come, and Joseph comes and hears Pharaoh's dreams and interprets them correctly, as there's going to be 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine. And then sure enough, that happens, and Joseph becomes, promoted up to in charge of all this, and he helps store the abundance so that during the famine there's enough left over. Okay, so that's the part we're not going to go through, but very interesting to read. And so now we are at this point where Joseph is kind of in charge of giving out all of the grain, and this famine has spread, throughout the region. So we have Joseph's brothers, right? Jacob, Joseph's father, and Joseph's brothers are getting hungry, and they need food, and they know that in Egypt there's grain and there are things that they can buy. So that's kind of where we're going to drop in. Okay, so let's do the screen share. Here we are. Okay. Parashat Miketz. Let me do it. Make it the slideshow. Okay, great. So we are going to look at these interactions between Joseph and his brothers. And one of the overarching questions we're going to think about is kind of how is Joseph testing his brothers? Like, what are different things that he is doing to kind of see if he can trust his brothers or not? And then yeah, thinking about whether it's working, if it feels like enough, if it feels like too much. Like, what are these interactions, these dramatic interactions? But first, the setup. So okay, so right, so we have his brothers who are coming, and here's Joseph, and he's in charge. Okay, so it says, I'm just gonna read. This is from Genesis chapter 42, verses 6 through 8. Now Joseph was the vizier of the land. It was he who dispensed rations to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed low to him with their faces on the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger toward them and spoke harshly to them. He asked them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to procure food." For though Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Right, so this is kind of the setup for the whole rest of what we're going to look at. Is there's this question of, right, how come Joseph's brothers didn't recognize him? And we need to know that Joseph's brothers didn't know who he was for the rest of the drama to play out, because if they knew who he was, this would read very differently. Right, so they don't recognize him, but Joseph recognizes his brothers. Okay, so some commentary on this. So again, there's this question of like, how did his brothers not recognize Joseph? Like, yes, of course he's older, but usually you can recognize people even after a long time. So we have some thoughts. So we have Rashi who said, right, this from this quote, he made himself strange to them, which is from verse 7. He said, he made himself like a nochri, a stranger to them in his conversation, speaking harshly. So Rashi says that how did he make himself like this stranger, this person that was foreign to his brothers, which the way he was speaking to them. So he's speaking to them harshly, which is maybe not the way that Joseph would have usually spoken, or someone who knew someone else would usually spoken. So it's like the style of interaction. Okay. Rambam says that right, so immediately as he saw them, as Joseph saw them, he recognized them, and he feared lest they recognize him, right? Joseph didn't want his brothers to recognize him. He wasn't ready for that. So, and he made himself strange unto them by putting a mitre upon his forehead and part of the face, thus disguising himself. So Rambam saying, actually, how did Joseph kind of make himself seem like not Joseph? He put on basically a mask, right? He covered part of his head and part of his face, right? So this is different. Instead of Rashi says, okay, it was how he was acting, and Rambam saying, no, actually, it is, he's covering his face here. Okay, I'm going to do a few more of these, and then I'll have time to look at the chat and see your comments. Okay, so again, we have the same text above the biblical text in the square. So what else? So now from Genesis Rabbah, which is a midrashic text a long time ago, kind of comments on Genesis. There's good stuff in there. So here he's saying Joseph saw his brothers and he recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them. So again, that's the quote from the Bible verse. Rabbi Yehoshua bar Nehemiah said he became like a stranger to them. Right. So what does it mean? So the Hebrew, I included the Hebrew here because just wanted to like pull it out. So let's see. Hopefully you can see. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there. So the word vayit naker. Okay, it seems okay. So vayit naker is the word in the Torah, which is like he, either made himself a stranger, he acted as a stranger. It's this reflexive verb, so it means, when you do something to yourself, usually, and that root, like nun kaf resh, is something about being foreign. As you can see, I brought in the biblical, the BDB dictionary, right? So this idea of nochri is someone foreign, alien. So he made himself a stranger. He acted as a stranger, and this interesting line, I don't know, this just drew me in, and I'm curious to hear what you all think about this. So this other Rabbi Yehoshua bar Nehemiah, said he became like a stranger to them. And I would love to hear thoughts around what does it mean to become like a stranger, right? And the Hebrew nasa nochri lahem, he was made, right? He like nasa, he was made a stranger to them. Yeah, so any thoughts kind of around this piece of recognition of being a stranger, what it might mean to the difference between acting as a stranger and becoming a stranger? Okay, I'm gonna look at the chat. Okay, wow, okay, lots of things I missed. Oh, Joseph would not have had the sun exposure of his siblings and probably clean shaven and perhaps more hair removal than his siblings. Nice. Yeah, and we'll see in this text 5, right? There's one person who says in Genesis Rabbah that right, Joseph had a beard when his brother sold him, and then he was not bearded when they saw him next. So yeah, so there could be some like facial hair. That's a good disguise. Yeah, when you're not expecting to see someone, it's really easy to not recognize them. Yeah, for sure. So maybe there's that. So maybe that's kind of, even if maybe they're like, this guy looks familiar, but I think that a lot when I'm like, that person looks familiar, but then it's like, maybe it's just because they have a Jewish face. I feel like a lot of people like look a little bit like someone else. So Joseph was one of the younger brothers, so maybe he changed more. Yeah, so Sherry, so nochri in some of the later texts can mean Christian. But here it's not, that has that like association hasn't been made. I mean, Christianity wasn't really around in the time of the Torah. But yeah, so that association isn't quite here yet. But yeah, he appeared different. Um, yeah, so I'm just looking at the chat. So much good stuff in here. Okay. Um, yeah, and talking about like their different parts of his personality, an Egyptian part, but also the Israelite part. And yeah, it like, when you grow up in one culture and then you move to another culture, right? Some parts of you might change, or his appearance, mannerisms, exactly. Um, and Nasimi said, sometimes one needs to show people a cold shoulder, at least for a while. Yeah, right. I mean, I think, and we'll see this as we continue on in the story in this Torah portion, that there is a lot happening. Joseph, there's a lot of hesitation that Joseph has, I think. Well, maybe this is me reading into it. You can disagree with me, but I think Joseph has a lot of hesitation to show himself to his brothers. I think maybe part of it is that cold shoulder piece. Like part of it is maybe a little bit of he's mad and he wants to, take it out on his brothers. And I think part of it is also just, feeling vulnerable and wanting, really feeling hurt by his brothers and wanting his brothers to, you know, be upset also, or just feel sorry, and he's not sure. And so I think there's like both of those things of Joseph feeling angry and Joseph maybe feeling vulnerable. Um, yeah. Yeah, when his brothers threw him in the fit, he was 17, now he's 30. Um, yeah. Yeah, so right, becoming a stranger seems to mean that he really felt anger at his brothers. He was not pretending. Totally, right. Maybe there is this the emotional piece. Um, yeah, I also wonder, right, like he became like a stranger to them. Was there some aspect of disguise beyond just Joseph changing his mannerisms and changing, how he was dressed and stuff? Was there something else? Was there some other like, divine haze that settled on the brothers to help Joseph, test his brothers in this way? Um, Great. Okay. Ah, so much good stuff. Okay. Wow. I love this. Um, Beautiful. Okay. Yes, he's wearing Clark Kent's glasses. Yeah, maybe he put glasses on and no one recognized him. Um, Yeah, okay. So exactly. So there's different ways that we can become strangers and can, be recognized or not. And yeah, to think about, when is it about appearance? When is it about mannerisms? When is it an emotional thing? We're putting up a wall between someone, and so it's like we don't know them, right? Because we're not letting them in. Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to go into, so now that we've set up that the brothers definitely don't recognize Joseph, for whatever reason that might be, and getting a little bit of a sense of maybe Joseph's emotional state in this moment, we're going to see how he tests his brothers and the different ways that Joseph sees his brothers. And yeah, you'll see, I think there are certain pieces as we go to pull out to see, okay, how is this testing them, or what is Joseph looking for in these moments? Okay, so we're picking back up here. Recalling the dreams that he had dreamed about them, Joseph said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the land in its nakedness." But they said to him, "No, my lord, truly your servants have come to procure food. We are all of us sons of the same man. We are being honest. Your servants have never been spies." Okay, so first off, right, we have the brothers here. And so Joseph is accusing them, right, to see, I don't know, I imagine him seeing, just like he's constantly going to see how his brothers are reacting, right? So he's like, okay, here we are. I'm going to accuse them of something. And, they're saying, no, that's not us. We're being honest. Here we are. We're going to be open. They're presenting themselves as very open, nothing to hide, which is, of course, very different from the brothers of, the earlier Joseph story, where they were, deceiving their brother, they were deceiving their father, when they told their father that Joseph was dead, and all of those things. So now they're going to be really honest. They're going to open up. So Joseph's kind of looking to push them to that. Okay. Sorry, I'm just taking a check at the, yeah, putting, right, Joseph's been putting them on the defensive. Um, yeah. And then, yeah, so some of you have pointed out in the chat, this verse 11 is a little bit interesting, right? We are all of us sons of the same man. We are being honest. Your servants have never been spies. And Rashi points out, right, this interesting thing, right? We are all one man's sons, and it seems to be maybe this kind of is a dramatic irony or something that actually when they say we are all the sons of the same man, it does include Joseph. And so there's kind of a question of, I think on the surface, it's not really actually they're not really talking about Joseph. They're talking about, the brothers who are there, and they're saying, and some of the commentaries point out that, right, if someone was sending spies, you probably wouldn't just send a whole family of brothers. That's not kind of how that happens. It's kind of conspicuous to do that. So they're like, okay, we can't be spies because we're all brothers. We're all the same person. But Rashi here has a different read on it, right? He says, we are all one man's son, all one man's sons. The Holy Spirit was enkindled in them, and they included him, right? They included Joseph with themselves by using the word we, that he also was the son of their father. Right? So there's this interesting, like, was it, there's some type of divine realization that, like, maybe Joseph is, part of this humanity, this whole humanity, right? Like, he's connecting, the brothers are connecting Joseph and themselves to everyone, to say, like, we are all, right, instead of just like we're all sons of Jacob, like, we are all connected, we're all together. We would not be spies because we see that we are connected to you and you're connected to us, on a more universal level. Yeah, Pamela, the Holy Spirit wanted to unify them again. Yeah, there's something here, right? There's like constantly this kind of push and pull of, do the brothers realize what's happening? Do they not? And we get the text kind of like puts in little droplets of, like, maybe there's something here. Maybe they know something. Maybe they don't. Maybe they know something, but they're not realizing, right? Maybe it's in their subconscious, and they're still realizing. Okay, Jay said, why did they have to say we are being honest? Could that imply that they realized that many of their previous actions were dishonest? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that they're really trying to say, like, we're being upfront here. And yeah, right, that it does, because we know of all of the things that they've done, we can kind of read into it their past. Yeah, I'll just check the chat briefly. Yeah, right there, Joseph's really humbling his brothers. Yeah, and I think part of, again, it's this anger, the anger piece, the wanting revenge piece, and it's also the wanting to really make sure that that his brothers have changed, right? So it's both of those pieces. Okay, continuing on. Okay, sorry for the huge block of text here. But yeah, usually I don't actually do this much text, but I feel like this narrative is so good, it's so dramatic, that I really wanted us to go through the narrative. So again, we're picking up where we left off. So I'll just push us back a slide for 1 second, right? So Joseph has accused them of being spies, and they're like, no, we're being honest. We've not been spies. We're all, sons of the same man. Okay. And Joseph said to them, no, you have come to see the land in its nakedness. And they replied, we, your servants, were 12 brothers, sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more, right? So they're really coming clean. They're like, okay, we're going to tell you everything. But Joseph said to them, it is just as I have told you. You are spies, right? No, Joseph's still pushing back here, right? By this you shall be put to the test. Unless your youngest brother comes here, by Pharaoh you shall not depart from this place. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain confined, that your words may be put to the test, whether there is truth in you. Else by Pharaoh you are nothing but spies. All right, so we get this. So again, Joseph's pushing back and he's saying, okay, how do I know you're telling the truth? You need to bring your youngest brother. And again, this seems to be some type of test, right? To see if they will go back and bring him. Yeah, okay, great. So then Joseph, right, we're verse 17. Joseph confined them in the guardhouse for 3 days. Okay, let's think about that piece too. Like what's going on there? On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you shall live, for I fear God. If you are being honest, let one of your brothers be held in your place of detention, while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. But you must bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified, and that you may not die." And they did accordingly. Okay, so right, so we have them being confined in the guardhouse for 3 days, which to me seemed like more of the punishment. That was less of a test. That was more of Joseph's like angry side, right? He's like, "You put me in a pit, I'm gonna put you in the guardhouse, and you're gonna have to deal." Um, I don't know if anyone thinks there's a different take on that. I'm just gonna check the chat really quickly, right? Maybe, right? Someone said, Sue said he wants to tell them the truth, right? Maybe, or he led them to think intentionally to think about him, the youngest brother. Um, yeah, right. So maybe there's this kind of idea of them wanting to, him wanting to sit. Maybe Joseph wasn't sure what to do. Maybe Joseph was wrestling with, maybe I should come clean to my brothers now and tell them who I am. And I'm going to wait, I'm going to think about it for 3 days, while, holding them in the guardhouse. And he decides ultimately that he's not ready to kind of come clean to his brothers. Why was Joseph protecting them from having to ask for food? Isn't that punishment enough? Um, Meaning, I mean, they did have to ask for food. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't understand exactly. Or are you saying that it's punishment enough that his brothers had to ask Joseph for food? Maybe. Yeah, right. They did have to humble themselves, but maybe Joseph didn't feel ready. It's a good point. Does Judaism have different categories of dishonesty that might apply to the brothers in this parsha? A great question. There's so much to talk about with like kind of Jewish practices and halakha, Jewish law around speech. It's kind of beyond the scope of today, but a very good question. But yeah, there is a lot of, I will say, to kind of touch on it, there is a lot of times where there are little white lies happening in the Torah. Even famously, God tells one with Abraham and Sarah way, back in the beginning of the book. And so there is an idea that there are certain times where you can kind of maybe slightly distort the truth in service of something else. But I'm not sure. I didn't really see a lot when I was looking into this for this session. I didn't see a lot of criticism of the way Joseph did this. I didn't see any kind of Joseph shouldn't be lying. I didn't see that, but we can definitely talk about whether or not this was, the ethical thing to do or the right thing to do. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Neil noticing an absence of Dina. Yeah, that happens often, right? The women kind of disappear. Yeah, so yeah, like 3 days for Jonah in the belly of the big fish. Yeah, so there's definitely, thanks for bringing that up, right? There's some tie-ins to this 3 day period of time. And so Jonah, right, which we read on Yom Kippur, this story of, Jonah being called to prophecy, and then he runs away and he gets swallowed by a big fish, and he's in there for 3 days. And through those 3 days, he kind of realizes what he needs to do and repent. So yeah, there could definitely be a tie-in. I think there's another story too, and I'm forgetting, that has a 3 day situation. So there's definitely something juicy there, definitely. Andrea, maybe he put them in jail to indicate he was serious. Yeah, maybe this is part of making himself like a stranger, right? Like continuing that ruse, saying, okay, like I'm really not going to let you off easy. I'm making myself this stranger. 3 could be symbolic of fullness. Yeah. Yeah, so Joe, you're saying no revenge in his actions. Had Joseph harbored revenge, he was in the position to wreak it on them for a while as the second in command to Pharaoh. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Joseph could have done a much worse than he did. So, yeah, there's definitely, it's a balanced, um, and yeah, this emotional experience with his brothers. So yeah, so there's a lot of emotions here. That's part of why I took this piece out of the parsha. Is there's so much emotion here. I can really feel like how fraught it is, and just like the emotions of the brothers and the emotions of Joseph, and just all the emotions that can come with family, and especially when family is not the most functional and there's been hurt and abuse, right? There's just like so much, it's so wrought here. And I don't know, at least I don't know if I'm reading it into this, but I really see it in these all of these interactions. Okay, great. Yeah, please keep going in the chat. The chat is very active, which I love, so I'm sorry that I'm missing some of it. But yeah, okay. So, right, so they've been confined in the guardhouse. Joseph says, okay, you gotta bring your youngest one back if you want more food. And then, okay, so now we're gonna be on, yeah, so verse 20, but you must bring me your youngest brother that your words may be verified and that you may not die. And they did accordingly. Okay, so that's what's gonna happen. Well, that's what Joseph said needs to happen. And then we have the brothers, right? So this is 21. They said to one another, alas, we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked on at his anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That is why this distress has come upon us. I'm going to keep reading and then I'll come back to that. Okay, great. Then Reuben spoke up and said to them, did I not tell you, do no wrong to the boy? But you paid no heed. Now comes the reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. He turned away from them and wept, but he came back to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. Okay, so this is like a very dramatic moment, right? I mean, the whole thing's been dramatic, but even more dramatic, right? So the brothers are kind of saying, we're being punished on account of our brother, right? That this is all befalling us because of what we did to Joseph, which is interesting because it literally is, right? Literally, Joseph is punishing them for what they did to him. But I take this as more, they're realizing that what they did was wrong. And that, it's kind of coming back to get them here. And right, this is a powerful moment because again, it has the brothers in front of Joseph saying we did something wrong and admitting that what they had done to him was wrong. And they admitted it even though they didn't know that it was Joseph there, right? It's not the brothers apologizing to Joseph saying, hey, dude, sorry for what happened. It's the brothers kind of spontaneously being like, wow, like this is happening because we did something wrong and we feel bad about it. Right. And Reuben is like, I told you we shouldn't have done it. And now here we are and we're in trouble. And then this verse 23, they did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them, which also adds a really interesting shade to this whole retelling that Joseph was talking through an interpreter to his brothers. So there's a further way that maybe he was making himself a stranger, is that he was talking through someone else, and he wasn't talking directly to them, but through someone else in a different language. But yeah, so they didn't know that Joseph understood all of this. So they're saying something, figuring that it's kind of a secret, right? Their secret language. But Joseph actually understood, of course. And yeah, but again, it's the brothers didn't know that Joseph understood. So again, Joseph really has a lot more information than the brothers have. The brothers are kind of in the dark, and Joseph knows who they are and, understands them and all of that. Okay, so Joseph turns away from them and wept. But he came back to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. So again, like he's, Joseph, upon hearing this admission, is really overcome with emotion and weeps, right? I imagine this is kind of like one of these cathartic cries, right? Something he's been holding in for a while, this hurt. And maybe I imagine that he has, thought about this for years, right? What it might be like to reunite with his brothers, and here it is happening, and kind of the emotion and the emotional relief that he obtains from hearing them say we were wrong. Okay, so let's look at a few commentators on these verses, and then I'll take a look at the chat. Okay, so again, these are the Torah verses are the same ones that we just read, but it's there for you to kind of refer back to see what these commentators are commenting on. So Ramban, another medieval commentator, is saying, right, it's obvious that the brothers now consider their display of cruelty towards Joseph as deserving of a greater punishment than the sale itself, since it was their blood brother who was imploring and prostrating himself before them, and they remained unmoved. Okay, so Rambam's saying, okay, so the brothers realized that this cruelty, right, when Joseph was pleading with them, not to sell him, not to put him in the pit or any of that, that was really the ultimate cruelty. And then there's this question of, okay, when, if you look back in the Torah portion, we don't get anything about Joseph pleading with his brothers, really. So how does it come in here? And Rambam says, Scripture, however, did not relate there, right there, back a few chapters ago, that Joseph implored them at the time of sale, either because it is naturally understood that a person would implore his brothers when falling into their grip, when their intention is to harm him, swearing by the life of his father, and doing all that is possible to save himself from death. And so they're saying, well, maybe, the Torah, it's limited words. So it tries to be very efficient. And so, it is obvious that Joseph would plead. So, it's just not written there. But we can assume that it happened. And another possible answer, he says, is here, it may be the desire of Scripture to speak only briefly of their sin, or it is possible that it's characteristic of Scripture to speak briefly about a matter in one place and to elaborate on it in another place. So we're getting another piece of information from the story from, chapters ago about when they sold Joseph, that, Joseph actually did plead with them and, was trying to plead for his life. So that's Ramban. Okay. And then Rashi on 24, and he wept because he heard that he regretted their past conduct to him, right? So that's why Rashi says that they were crying. He was crying because, wow, his brothers he heard that his brothers regretted their past conduct. Okay, I'm gonna briefly look at the chat again. Okay, Jenny says, why did he choose Simeon to be bound? Yeah, so that actually, that's some commentary I looked at that I didn't include because, it's only so much time, but one, it might be Rashi, you can check me, but describes that Simeon and Levi are kind of the two who are described as being violent, right? They're the two that go and wreak havoc on Shechem with Dinah, right? They're the ones who kill a lot of people, and so Joseph wants to make sure that he's going to separate his two violent brothers so that they don't come and try and take revenge or kill him. And so that's one of the reasons why some commentators say he chose Simeon, was because Simeon is one of the violent ones, and he wants to make sure that Simeon is kind of taken out of play. But I'm sure, yeah, Michael says, doesn't Simeon always have a dark cloud over him in the Torah at times? Yeah, so right, so it's kind of connected to that. Oh, Andrea, Rashi is being generous. They are regretting that their past conduct caught up with them. Yeah, okay. It's an interesting read, right? Are the brothers being genuine, or is it also they only are regretting it because now they're facing the consequences, right? Now they're being held accountable, right? Because it does seem like in some ways that this conversation is happening for the first time here, right? Because they're saying, okay, we're being punished on account of our brother. And then Reuben is saying, didn't I tell you? Like, I told you so. That to me feels like that's the first time this conversation is happening, because I would imagine that, you might not have this conversation every single time where Reuben would be like, I told you we shouldn't do this. But maybe, yeah. So, right, is this genuine, or is it because they're scared? And maybe that is also a reason why Joseph continues to like push and test his brothers, right? Is because he's trying to figure out, are they being genuine, or are they doing this because they're scared? Yeah. And right, again, they're definitely demonstrating remorse, but where's it coming from? Andy said, my rabbi pointed out that Joseph really doesn't know if Benjamin is okay. Maybe they attacked him too. Yeah, so maybe they're curious if, the brothers have continued this pattern of attacking, their other brothers, especially the ones their mother was Rachel. Yeah, Yeah. So, okay, lots of good stuff there. Thank you. Okay, we'll continue on. Okay, so now we're skipping some text. So now we're skipping um, just that the brothers are going to go home, minus Simeon. And then they retell the events to their father Jacob and what's happening. And Jacob doesn't want to send Benjamin down with them, obviously, because he's like, I already lost one son. Like, don't make me lose another. Um, and so, Jacob says, no, we're not doing that. But then, eventually they use up all their food. And so they have to go back to Egypt. They have no choice. They need to get more food. They're going to starve. So Reuben convinces Jacob to let Benjamin come with the brothers, and it's all very dramatic. So you can check it out and read that. And then when the brothers get back to Egypt, Joseph, through his steward, invites them to his house. So that's where we're dropping back in, and it's interesting because a lot of this piece, it does seem like the brothers are genuinely remorseful and that there's been some emotional growth, and it's demonstrating it, but since Joseph doesn't get to see this part, that's why I kind of skipped it. So the Torah is, I think, like showing us that the brothers have really grown and are remorseful and are more aware of the consequences of their actions. But because this isn't part of a Joseph test, that's why I kind of skipped it. Okay, great. So now we're diving back in. Okay, and great. So when Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts that they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground, right? So Joseph invited them to his house, right? Okay. He greeted them and he said, "How is your aged father of whom you spoke? Is he still in good health?" They replied, "It is well with your servant, our father. He is still in good health." And they bowed and made obeisance, right? So Joseph is asking about his father and right, like I think hoping that he's going to be able to see him. And so this is good news for him. Looking about, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he went on, "May God be gracious to you, my boy." With that, Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother, and he was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there, right? So this is the second time, at least in this parsha, that Joseph is crying again. He's overcome with emotion. Um, right here, it's like a different, because it's seeing Benjamin, it's seeing his brother, and right there's a connection maybe to his mother who he's missing, right? Because she died in childbirth with Benjamin, and so there's a lot. There's a lot there. A lot of deep emotion is happening in here, and so he's overcome with feeling, and he kind of takes himself out of the situation. He cries, yeah, tears of healing potentially. Yeah. Then he washed his face, reappeared, and now in control of himself, gave the order, "Serve the meal." Right? And there's some commentators like, "Why did he wash his face?" And I was like, obviously washed his face to cover up the tears. That's what they all say anyway. So yeah, so I know I have had some times where I have washed my face after crying, so people wouldn't know I cried. So this is a millennia old practice to wash your face. So anyway, so he's right. He's covered up the fact that he was crying, and he gave the order, "Serve the meal." They served him, right? They served Joseph by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptian who ate with him by themselves. The Egyptians could not dine with the Hebrews, since that would be abhorrent to the Egyptians, right? So we have this little like interesting thing here about eating practices. And so they're gonna eat, right? The Hebrews are gonna eat separately from the Egyptians because they have all of them have different dietary practices and restrictions. Great. As they were seated by Joseph's direction, from the oldest in the order of his seniority to the youngest in the order of his youth, the men looked at one another in astonishment. Portions were served them from his table, but Benjamin's portion was several times that of anyone else, and they drank their fill with him. Right, so there are two things happening here again, is so somehow, right, the brothers were seated in their birth order, which is surprising because obviously they don't know that Joseph knows who they are. So okay, so this is making them like wonder what's going on. And then two, Benjamin is getting more food, right? He's getting more portion than anyone else. And so what's going on here? And so here we go. So I'm going to skip this Bereshit Rabbah, but on Sforno on Genesis, so another commentator says, right, Joseph is giving Benjamin a lot more to see if the brothers would display signs of jealousy. Right. So this is again another test, right? If he, like how Joseph was showed favor by Jacob and the brothers got jealous, here Joseph's showing favor to Benjamin to see if the brothers are going to get jealous or react in any way. And it seems that they don't, right? They pass this test because, okay, Benjamin's getting a lot more, but still they all drank their fill with him, right? They all were together eating the meal. There was no fight that broke out or anything like that. So this is potentially another test. Okay. Great. Okay, so here's the last set of text, and then I'll kind of look at the chat and we'll finish up because I know we're almost at time. Okay, so great. So they've had their meal, and now we go. Then Joseph instructed his house steward as followed: fill the men's bags with food as much as they can carry, and put each one's money in the mouth of his bag. Put my silver goblet in the mouth of the bag of the youngest one, together with his money for the rations. And he did as Joseph told him. With the first light of morning, the men were off with their pack animals. They had just left the city and had not gone far when Joseph said to his house steward, "Up, go after those men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why did you repay good with evil?' It is the very one from which my master drinks and which he uses for divination. It was a wicked thing for you to do." He overtook them and spoke those words to them. Right? In this moment, I kind of wonder what Joseph's steward is thinking, like, because Joseph's steward did the thing where he put the cup in the bag, and now he's coming, now the steward's coming, and, so I think the steward probably has some awareness that there's a plot happening, but maybe not sure exactly what. Okay. And they said to him, to Joseph's steward, "Why does my lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything of the kind. Here we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money that we found in the mouths of our bags. How then could we have stolen any silver or gold from your master's house? Whichever of your servants it is found with shall die. The rest of us, moreover, shall become slaves to my lord." He replied, "Although what you are proposing is right, only the one with whom it is found shall be my slave, but the rest of you shall go free." Right? So the brothers are saying, okay, like, we definitely didn't do this, but if we did, like, take us all as slaves and kill the one who stole it. And the servant's saying, "No, I'm not going to kill anyone, but the person who took the cup is going to be the slave." Okay, and then continuing on. So each one hastened to lower his bag to the ground, and each one opened his bag. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the goblet turned up in Benjamin's bag, right? So it's like this building drama because they're starting with the oldest, and we know that it's in Benjamin's, which is the youngest. And so there's this like suspense here. So it's in Benjamin's bag. Bad news, right? At this, they rent their clothes, each reloaded his pack animal, and they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers re-entered the house of Joseph, who was still there, they threw themselves on the ground before him. Okay, so wait, even more drama. Joseph said to them, "What is this deed that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me practices divination?" Judah replied, "What can we say to my lord? How can we plead? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered the crime of your servants. Here we are then, slaves of my lord, the rest of us as much as he in whose possession the goblet was found." Right, so again, Judah, right, this is the test that, again, I think the brothers are passing to say, okay, we're not going to just leave our brother behind. We're all together now. We're not going to do that again. So like our fates are all combined, right? We have loyalty to each other. But Joseph replied, "Far be it from me to act thus. Only the one in whose possession the goblet is found shall be my slave. The rest of you go back in peace to your father." And so Joseph is this is again a test, right? He's pushing them to say, no, like, I'm just going to take Benjamin. The rest of you can go. And this is where the Torah portion ends. So that's an exciting little cliffhanger. So we'll have to see what happens next week. So I know we're coming to time, but yeah, so just some things to ponder over is, what's going on emotionally, right? Where's Joseph testing? When is he going too far or maybe not far enough? And to think about, just like all of those emotions that are going on, and are Joseph's brothers actually repentant and genuinely sorry, or are they feeling sorry because they're scared? And right, yes, Joseph is giving the brothers a very harsh test indeed, but maybe deserved or maybe not. So that's something we can argue about it in the chat. But yeah, sorry I don't have more time to like look at all the chat things, but thank you so much. I hope that was engaging for you, and Yeah, thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and for learning with me on this lovely Friday. And yeah, I look forward to learning with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, and thank you all for being here. Uh, Normally, we don't share during our sessions of other My Jewish Learning offerings we have going on, but it is just so relevant to this part in our Torah portion. We are doing a paid series on Jewish dreams. So if you are interested in learning about the history, the practices of Jewish dream interpretation, I just put a link in the chat, and I'll also include it in the follow-up. But beyond that, thank you so much, Rabbi. We'll include the recording for this session along with the source sheets in the follow-up. And a very happy Hanukkah and Shabbat. Bye bye.
Yeah.